GDP stands for Gross Domestic Product. It measures the total value of all goods and services produced in a country over a given period, usually a year. This indicator was conceptualized in 1930s and has become a common yardstick for assessing a country's economic performance. To simplify things, let's take a baker as an example. Suppose a baker sells a roll for €1. To produce it, he needs certain ingredients such as flour, yeast, water, and salt, which cost 30 cents, as well as energy, which costs 10 cents. These are the intermediate inputs used in bread production. The wealth created, called added value, is the difference between production and intermediate consumption. In our example, this is 60 cents, or €1 minus 30 cents minus 10 cents. This added value is used to pay the baker, the employees, and taxes. A country's GDP is the sum of all added values of all the producers of goods and services. It includes all sorts of economic activities, ranging from bakeries to banks. Suppose the baker sales have increased by €100 compared with the previous year. This can translate a rise in production or simply a price increase, or both. In fact, price trends influence GDP in value terms, which may over or underestimate the quantity of wealth created. This is why, to assess the economic situation of a country, economists usually focus on real GDP, which neutralizes price variations and accounts for quality changes. StatEC agents gathered thousands of administrative and survey data on production, consumption, and investment. These data are then compiled according to international standards to obtain GDP. GDP is a thermometer of a country's economic activity. Its calculation method is standardized, enabling for international comparisons. Changes in GDP are often used as a benchmark for economic policy. Economic growth occurs when real GDP increases from one year to the next. If it falls, we speak of recession. Generally speaking, economic activity evolves in cycles. The evolution of GDP makes it possible to determine the different phases, such as expansion, stagnation, or recession, and to adapt economic policy accordingly. For example, in a period of weak growth or recession, the government may be encouraged to implement an economic stimulus policy. But in a period of strong growth, it will be tempted to pursue a less generous policy in order to avoid overheating the economy. To determine a country's economic weight on the world stage, we usually base ourselves on its GDP. From this point of view, Luxembourg, a small economy, comes at the bottom at the world ranking. From another point of view, looking at GDP per capita, which reflects a country's average standard of living, Luxembourg is among the richest countries. But this fact is to be nuanced, as part of Luxembourg's wealth is generated not only by its active inhabitants, but also by its cross-border workers. GDP is often criticized for a number of reasons. A common critic is that it only takes into account economic exchanges with a monetary equivalent. In other words, parents looking after their child at home do not contribute to GDP, but hiring a nanny to do so does. The same applies to any other activity with no exchange value, such as unpaid domestic work or voluntary work. To give another example, GDP does not take into account negative externalities resulting from economic production, such as environmental degradation or adverse health effects. Also, GDP does not measure well-being, nor the level of inequality within a society. That's why StatEC also produces the well-being GDP, which includes quality of life indicators such as CO2 emissions, inequality, and health status.